This is your Friday Daily Delivery. I am Michael Rand. Happy to be with you at the end of this week. Happy holidays to everybody. Merry Christmas Eve. Hope everybody has a great holiday weekend. Got to talk Timberwolves here in a moment, but mostly going to spend a lot of time talking about the Vikings heading into a very important game this weekend against the Rams. Ben Goessling will join me here in just a little bit to talk through that. Beat writer for the Vikings. Big news on Thursday. Dalvin Cook going on the COVID list, and Kirk Cousins showing up on the injury report. Ben reporting that is a cracked rib for Kirk Cousins. Sounds like that will not affect his status for playing in the game. Whether that impacts how he is able to play in the game is another question, so we'll have to keep an eye on that as Sunday gets closer. But first, what did I miss? In conjunction with Dalvin Cook, who we'll get to a lot with Ben Goessling here in a minute. Big news Thursday in Twin Cities sports, and frankly, all across sports everywhere, and frankly, all across the world everywhere, is still COVID. Karl-Anthony Towns now out with COVID. 7 different Timberwolves players on the COVID reserve list. 4 of them starters: Towns, Anthony Edwards, Patrick Beverley, and Jared Vanderbilt, all on the list, plus 3 other reserves. Towns, he's got a feel for Towns. He tweeted, "Can't catch a break." There was a clever expletive along with that, but this is a guy who caught COVID last year, missed a bunch of games because of it, has had family members. He has said he's had family members, multiple family members, including his mother, die from COVID, and now he's boosted, he's vaccinated. I'm assuming he's doing what he can to stay healthy, and he gets this again. No idea exactly what variant it is, but guessing it's probably the one that's circulating through the world, through the NBA right now. Now, Omicron is everywhere. It's impacting sports. It's impacting our lives. You're seeing way more people going on these COVID lists in sports lately. NFL tweaking its rules. Don't want to spend a ton of time on that just because it's a subject that's, A, very important, so you don't want to just dismiss it, but B, I think we're all worn out by this and trying to figure out how we are supposed to keep going in our lives. The Wolves trying to keep going. They lost to Utah shorthanded on Thursday night. Gave it a good run, but defensively did not have much in store for the Jazz. Final 128-116. Malik Beasley got all the 3-point attempts he won to 33 points, 7 of 16 from 3-point range, 33 points, 6 rebounds. D'Angelo Russell had a good game, 19 points, 14 assists, 7 rebounds, 4 of 8 from 3-point range, but down that many starters against a very good team already. One of the few teams in the league that's not had much by way of COVID issues. The Wolves were just too short-handed to put up much more of a fight. But, be interesting to see how they are able to cope with this, not just, mentally, but physically as well as the year goes on. It's just going to be a story that carries over into 2022, unfortunately, even though we thought maybe we were turning a corner in that regard.
Take a playcation to Mystic Lake for 24/7 gaming, fun restaurants and bars, and luxurious hotel rooms. And join Club M to bask in the rewards. Follow the lights to Mystic Lake, where every day is play day.
Very happy to have Ben Goessling on Daily Delivery. We talk every week, Ben, on the Access Vikings podcast, but haven't had you on Daily Delivery as a regular guest for a while here. Did a lot of off-season stuff, but in season, we've kind of stuck to the Access Vikings, but a very newsy Thursday, Ben. Tell me everything you know about Dalvin Cook on the COVID list, Kirk Cousins' injury status, and everything of that nature.
Boy, oh boy. Yeah, it's a newsy Thursday, or just as we call it on the Vikings beat, Thursday. Dalvin Cook is on the COVID list. He was placed on there this morning after testing today. He is not vaccinated, so he is testing every day as even part of these new protocols. So it sounded like this morning, as per Patrick Peterson, he was placed on the COVID list, and they now, I think, will be without him on Sunday at the very least. If he's a close contact, he would only be out for 5 days, but if he tested positive, he's out for 10. So at the very least, you're talking about him not playing on Sunday against the Rams. I would think would have a chance to get back for the Packers game. But if he tested positive, it's going to be close. So that's where we stand there. As for Cousins, practiced in full again today. I had a source tell me that he has a cracked rib. He had an MRI to confirm that earlier this week, but he's been able to practice, was throwing a little bit yesterday. It looked like he was in a little bit of pain as he did it, but was able to practice in full. I don't think there's any risk of him not playing. What the question will be, how much does it affect him during the game? But I think he's planning to be full go and try to fight through it. And I think his durability over the years would suggest that he'll be able to do it. So yeah, it's some injury twists and turns for the Vikings as they head into this one. But the good news, I guess, Adam Thielen has practiced in limited fashion the last couple of days. I think has a fairly good chance to go. So lots to be determined here in the 72 hours before the game. But yeah, the big ones today are Cousins and Cook for sure.
Now, Cousins hadn't been on the injury report for like 8 years, right? I mean, he's the model of for whatever you think of Kirk Cousins, and he's certainly a polarizing quarterback in a lot of ways. His durability has never been in question. I mean, he's made every start going back that far and not been on the injury report. Now, I do wonder, like you said, I got a couple questions about it. One, do we have a hint of when that cracked rib might have happened? Was it sometime during the Bears game, or is it an aggravation of something else, or what do we know about that?
My understanding is it happened during that Bears game, and I think he had to get an MRI right after that. I think it would have shown up on the injury report sooner if it had happened sooner than that. Maybe there was something that got aggravated more so during the Bears game, but he got hit an awful lot in that game. And I got to go back now and look at where it happened. I got to try to figure out the number of, I think he got hit 5 or 6 times, and we got to figure out exactly when it was, because it's possible that he played most of that game with that injury. And then the question that you would come to is, did that affect the way he played? And then is that going to be a problem going forward? I think that's the big thing to figure out, because he's certainly been a guy that can go out there and fight through a lot of things, and certainly takes a lot of hits and has been exposed to a lot of hits by the way this offensive line has played. But if it's going to affect him going forward, I think that becomes the bigger concern.
I said there was a tweet, we don't know when it happened, but there was a tweet from that Bears game. Kind of don't know when in the game it was, but he took a pretty significant hit. I don't know who got him, but it was a sack early on. It seemed like a blindside hit, and it seemed like a lot of weight came down on him. And I wonder if that might have been the play. But your bigger point's a good one, that depending on how long he was playing with it in that game, did not look entirely comfortable playing in that game, and did not make some of the best throws he's made. Ended up with fewer than 100 yards passing. And it's certainly fair to wonder, not if he's going to play this weekend, but how effective he'll be, especially with Aaron Donald and Von Miller chasing after him.
Yeah, and no Dalvin Cook to try to make that pass rush think twice. So, yeah, I mean, it's a big concern, I think, as we head into this game, because this, I think, was going to be a tough assignment for this offense as it was. But if Cousins is not 100%, or if that's affecting him in any way, then you do have to wonder how he's going to look, especially when you're probably going to have Jalen Ramsey shadowing Justin Jefferson. I think that is going to be the Rams' approach to try to take Jefferson out of the game. If Thielen is not 100% on a high ankle sprain, that is probably going to hurt them as well. So they have a lot of things with that offense to try to get figured out. When you have no Dalvin Cook, Adam Thielen may not be 100%. Kirk Cousins may not be 100%, and Justin Jefferson is getting the white glove treatment from one of the best corners in the game.
Now, they do have Alexander Mattison back, right? He's back from the COVID list and should be good to go. And he's been a pretty good fill-in for them. And, having seen what Wangu can do, it's maybe not as dire as if both Mattison and Cook were out at the same time, but certainly puts the onus on Mattison in that game, because they can't just be a passing team in that game.
No, they can't. And I think you're going to have to do some things to try to slow that pass rush down. And Mattison certainly has been a very functional number 2 guy. He's not Dalvin Cook. He doesn't have the explosive ability of Dalvin Cook, and probably isn't going to, but you can run the ball with him. And I think Kene Wangu, you're going to have to probably use in a bigger role, because you need a guy with that kind of game-breaking ability. And we saw it even Monday night in the 4 or 5 touches he got. I think he averaged 9 or 10 yards a carry in that game. And you see the elite speed. You see the ability to make things happen with just a little bit of space. And I think you're going to have to try in a lot of ways to try to get that going and to try to see what he can bring to your offense if you give him a little bit more, because you're going to need to score points in this game. Dalvin Cook talked about it yesterday when I asked him about the lack of offensive production in the last 6 quarters. He said, I don't know what you guys want. If you want 200 yards, 300 yards, if we get 20 and we win the game, that'll be fine. Yes, that would be fine. But against this team and against Matthew Stafford, I would submit you're probably going to need something closer to 300 yards of total offense, or maybe even more than that, probably more than that, given the fact this is the NFL in 2021. I don't think 20 yards is going to do it.
I don't think so either. And I'm frankly, like, just as you list off all of these things, as we think about, Matthew Stafford kind of refining his stride, the Rams winning, I think 3 in a row now coming into this game, and kind of maybe reimagining and recapturing what they had going on earlier in the season. It didn't feel like a good matchup before, and it just, with everything that's happened in the last 24 hours, feels even less so now.
Yeah, I would agree. It's a tough one to win. And I think you can figure, okay, the Rams have had their moments where they haven't looked great. They had to struggle through that one against Seattle on Monday or Tuesday night, and they're coming off of a short week. There's all of those things that would tell you this could be a closer game than it has been, or at least would look like it might be on paper. But that front seven against that against the Vikings offensive line, I think is a bad matchup. The Vikings now have to figure out again who their right guard's going to be, with Mason Cole not practicing. Could be Oli Udoh back out there at right guard. I think you're going to have a lot of trouble trying to protect Cousins, trying to run the ball. You have a lot of things that don't play in your favor. So it's going to have to be one of those games where they figure out how to overcome a lot of these mismatches and try to figure out a way to get around it. I don't think this is I think this is a worse matchup for them on paper than going to Lambeau Field is in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And, this one is at US Bank Stadium. That does count for something, in terms of, especially at the line of scrimmage, getting off the ball, things like that they could get, they do. Let's not forget, they do lead the league in sacks. So they could still affect the game that way, make Stafford make a couple mistakes. It does. Oftentimes these games do come down to those few big plays. You did touch on the offensive line, though, and that's been a problem the last couple of weeks. They've gotten away with it because they've played, Pittsburgh looked like they were sleepwalking through the first half, and they managed to get out of there with that win. Chicago just self-inflicted all over the place, just mistakes up and down the field. The Rams will not make those same mistakes. On the offensive line, is there a configuration? I know there's not an ideal configuration. What do you think is even their best configuration if everybody's healthy right now? Because they've tried so many things. What have they looked best at? Because none of it's looked great to me.
Yeah, I think the thing I was going to say is I thought last week going into that game that probably is their best configuration, with Darisaw at left tackle and you're back to Mason Cole at right guard. You have Garrett Bradbury at center. Again, I think that's probably the best one, but then Mason Cole gets beat by Akeem Hicks like a lot of these guys have over the years, and he just didn't have an answer for him. So whether or not you're going to have him, I think is going to be an open question. The fact that he hasn't practiced the last 2 days, it doesn't look like a great sign. So I thought that was the best one, and they had as much trouble Monday night as they've had all year. So you do sit there and say, what else can they do? They've kind of thrown everything at the problem that they can, short of putting Wyatt Davis out there. But the fact that they haven't even wanted to explore that tells you what they've thought of how he's practiced and how he's come along. I just don't think that's going to happen. So they're kind of out of options, short of guys playing better and starting to figure it out. And that's the scary thing, is that you now have to deal with Aaron Donald, Kenny Clark, Akeem Hicks in the next 3 weeks. And the Rams still have Leonard Floyd. They have Von Miller. The Packers will have Rashawn Gary, which they did not last time. There's a lot that you're going to be putting on that offensive line, especially with a quarterback that is playing through a very possibly painful and possibly limiting injury. I think there's a lot that line is going to have to do pretty well in these next 3 weeks for them to get into the playoffs.
They did activate Dakota Dozier from the practice squad. Let's not rule that out either.
That may end up being the solution. It could be Dozier, it could be Udoh. I think either one of those is a possibility. The question is, how effective are any of them going to be? Because we saw it with Dakota Dozier last year. He started every game, played every snap of the season, and they said, we've seen enough. We're not going to make you the starter. That was the training camp battle. It was Dozier and Udoh, and they decided they liked Udoh better. So if we're still trying to figure out guys that were in training camp battles and we're in we're in late December, we're at Christmas weekend, that's probably not a great sign for how anybody's done.
No, it is not. Let's end with the final thought. I mean, you kind of laid it out, what they're up against on the offensive line against some of these guys. Big picture, this is, I've written about this. I wrote about this, Friday morning on the blog. Just like, it feels like these last three games, like the direction of this franchise, I don't want to be overly dramatic, but the direction of this franchise kind of hinges on what happens in these next three games, at least from where I sit. How do you kind of reconcile the big picture of all of it as you kind of think about these three games and what they mean?
Well, I think you're right. I mean, they are in a spot where they probably have to win and get into the playoffs to keep everybody around. I would have a hard time seeing them go into 2022 not having made the playoffs 2 years in a row and say, yeah, we're fine. We're going to keep rolling it back. I mean, you could make a case for that, I suppose, but I think it would be hard to see the Wilfs saying forever that we haven't won the division in 4 straight years. We haven't made the playoffs in 2. We've only gotten in once as the last team to get in. Yes, we won a playoff game, but we haven't done anything since. Let's keep going with it. So, yes, I think it does hang in the balance. I think if you get in, you're going to have beaten 2 good teams probably, or at least played with one and, probably beat the Bears, and maybe that gets you in. But you'll have to have done something to establish your playoff bona fides. And if you can't do that, yes, I do think the future of a lot of people, Rick Spielman, Mike Zimmer, Kirk Cousins, possibly even as it relates to whoever's making the decisions about the roster next year, I think all of those futures hang in the balance. So, you don't want to put it in one game. And Mark Wilf has talked about this in the past, saying we don't want to be caught up in this thing of one game, but this isn't just one game. This is the last, I think you said it on Access Vikings the other day. If this is the last piece of evidence you are going to show kind of making your closing argument, these matchups are not the ones that give you the best chance to put your best foot forward.
No, they're not. But I guess that's why they play the games. We'll still be watching them, entertained by them. It's fascinating. It's been a fascinating Vikings year, I'm sure. For you to cover. I mean, it's been every week there's something new, and unfortunately, COVID throws another wrinkle into that. You kind of never know when someone else is going to pop up on that list and impact how a game plan is going to go. But it has not been dull, Ben. It has not been dull. Let's say that at least.
No, it's I remember we talked about it at the beginning of the season, and I thought this is year 10 on the beat for me. And I thought this had the potential, at least in terms of on-field stuff, to be the most fascinating team I'd covered, because I thought, and we talked about it, it could go either way. They could go win 10, 11 games, or they could lose 10 or 11 games, and none of it would surprise you. And we sit here 3 weeks left, 10 wins and 10 losses are both still in play. And I would submit that this has been even more fascinating than we could have predicted it was going to be, even when we were talking about this at the beginning of the season. The way they won, the way they've lost, all of the things that have happened, it has not been dull. It's probably not been good for anybody's blood pressure, but certainly gives those of us ink-stained wretches out there plenty to write about.
Well, they won't ruin Christmas. The game is the day after Christmas. We'll see.
Could ruin Boxing Day. It could be a great Boxing Day.
Could be a great Boxing Day
for the Canadian Vikings fans, because I'm sure there are some people up in Winnipeg that would be very happy to celebrate their Boxing Day with a big win over the Rams.
That's very true. Well, we'll see what happens. Ben Goessling, good stuff. Have happy holidays. Read Ben's coverage from Sunday's game. Start Tribune, starttribune.com. Ben and Andrew Kramer will have a post-game podcast, Access Vikings as well. And Ben, thanks for joining me here today.
You got it, Mike. Thanks for having me.
Good insights from Ben Goessling. As always, you'll want to, like I mentioned at the end of our segment, follow him, read his game story from Sunday's game, and listen to the Access Vikings podcast after the game. Ben and Andrew Kramer will break that all down. Vikings did get a little bit of a break on Thursday. San Francisco loses to Tennessee. That moves San Francisco to 8-7 now on the season. If San Francisco, even if they win next week against Houston, if they lose their finale at the Rams and finish 9-8, the Vikings have some favorable 3-team tiebreakers with the 49ers. Remember, the head-to-head would not be good, but the 3-team tiebreakers with the Vikings and the Saints and the 49ers, things like that, would be pretty favorable to the Vikings. So keep that in mind. caught a little bit of a break with San Francisco losing that game. Happy to be joined today on Daily Delivery by Mark Craig, covers the NFL and the Vikings for the Star Tribune. We do a picks segment every week. He writes about that too on Star Tribune, startribune.com. Mark, a lot of really interesting games this week, maybe the best slate that I've seen for a while.
Yeah, it's there's like 5 games that have 2 teams with winning records. I think 9 games or something like that with at least 500 or better to both teams. It's a good week. It's and there's 5 teams that I get to play an extra meaningless game because they're out of the playoffs in a 17-game season. So hats off. Half the NFC North is playing for nothing. So.
But the Lions, they're the world beaters. I can't believe what they did to the Cardinals last week, and we'll get into Arizona here in a minute. But we do have to start with the Vikings, the other team the Lions beat this year so far. Big game, obviously, against the Rams. Vikings are home underdogs. I think the spread, as of we're talking right now, is a field goal that the Rams are favored by. A lot to like about what the Rams have done lately, about the way they're built. I've got concerns about how a Vikings offensive line that's really been hard-pressed to stop good interior pass rush is going to handle Aaron Donald on Sunday. But I'd like to get your thoughts on how you see this matchup going.
Well, you just nailed it. That's the key to everything right there. They're, like Zimmer said, they're an all-star on defense. Like, someone could say they're an all-star team on offense as well. But to me, it starts with, if I went back and looked for the Sunday story, I looked at all the highlights of what Aaron Donald was able to do to that team. Even though it was an exciting game, it was back and forth. They lost 37 or 38-31. When it came time at the end of that game, fourth quarter, Aaron Donald said enough's enough, and he started beating the guards at that time were Mike Remmers and Tom Compton, and Elflein was the center, and he had his way. There was some embarrassing plays for the offensive line. And I have a feeling that it's going to start there. They got to take care of him. And then obviously you got Von Miller, you got Leonard Floyd. But when I look at the Rams, I don't see the fear of the Rams. I think the Rams should be as afraid of the Vikings. It's hard to say after the Vikings, how their offense played the last 6 quarters, but the Rams started out, I think when they beat Tampa Bay, they were 3-0. And then I believe they might've gone 3-1. And then they hit a stretch of 4 games where they beat, they're 3-0. And then when they played a good team, they lost. When they played bad teams, they won. They got to 7-1, 8-1, whatever it was. Then they lost 3 in a row, and now they've won 3 in a row. So, I see an up and down team. I don't see a dominant team. I don't know that the league has one right now. So where it's at, when it's played, the fact that the Vikings played a Monday night game and they have more days between games than the Rams playing on Tuesday. You play on a Tuesday, you got to travel. That's why I picked the Vikings, but I could also see the Rams, just dominating that offensive line and making me look like, which a lot of my picks tend to look foolish. So this could be one of them.
How do you, like you said, they got to block Aaron Donald. You got to probably get the ball out relatively fast and or max protect, move Cousins around a little bit. How do you attack this Rams defense? I think we talked on Access Vikings with Ben Goessling and Andrew Kramer a little bit about maybe them being a little vulnerable in the middle of the field, maybe not having the best linebackers in the world. How would you attack the Rams if you were the Vikings?
Well, yeah, moving Cousins around, it would be a decent idea because he tends not to, this far into his career, he tends not to, he still doesn't have that slide or that step up, because I don't think he trusts over the years, or at least here, hasn't trusted the ability to step up. Like in that Rams game, there was a sack where Troy Aikman goes down and explains it in 2018, where Cousins got some pressure on the outside. It might have been the strip sack at the end of the game, where he doesn't trust stepping up to avoid that. Well, he didn't trust it because Aaron Donald is there in the middle. And Von Miller had his first sack against the Seahawks. So Donald and Miller each had a sack in that game. So if you start rolling them out and say Donald's on one side, Miller's on the other, you got to. I do think you need to move Kirk around. What What I don't like, and I know they vary things up, but when he turns to the left, it seems like there's always a rusher in his face. That's one of my least favorite plays when they move him around. So yeah, and then you got Jalen Ramsey. So you got all pro caliber players at all three levels. So it's going to be a tough one, but I think it really helps being at home.
Yeah, and that like you said, the rest factor is interesting with the Rams having to have that game moved to Tuesday this past week, 2 extra days of making it a shorter week for them than the Vikings. And you're right, Vikings at home. So yeah, Rams traveling on a short week. That's a factor that can't be ignored. I think people kind of like maybe forget about that, but the recovery time in the NFL and the travel is a more significant factor, especially a team coming from pretty far away to get here.
Yeah, I mean, I got some scar tissue with that because I got knocked out of my survivor pool with after Baltimore beat the Vikings, and I'm thinking they're going to Miami. They can't stop Lamar Jackson because no one can stop Lamar Jackson, and they got smoked in Miami because they were a worn-out team. I mean, we talked about the Vikings playing 90 snaps in that game. Well, Lamar Jackson played 90 snaps as well, and he had to turn around, go to Miami, and play 4 days later. And then we saw with the Steelers, and that the Steelers aren't traveling on a short week. Maybe they don't start out looking like Ben Roethlisberger's 100 years old because they made adjustments and then almost came back and won. But they were flat, tired, worn out at the start of that game, and I think it's much harder on the road team to do that. So, I think it's definitely going to be a factor.
Let's stick in the division for a minute. Green Bay gets to host the Browns. Browns have been depleted this week by COVID. We'll see exactly who is available to them in that Saturday game. That said, you like the Packers in this game. Packers have a lot to play for at this point because obviously with some of those teams losing last week, they've got a pretty clear path to get that first round bye, right?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, there's no dominant team in the league, but I still like the Packers were my Super Bowl pick to win it all. There was a little hiccup in that first week when they lost 38-3 or whatever was going on with that. But I just don't see the Packers losing to the Browns. I mean, the COVID issue is an issue, but even if Baker Mayfield plays, I don't know that changes my opinion. Tim or Case Keenum, and we saw back-to-back days where COVID claimed the top 2 quarterbacks with Washington and the Browns. And so COVID might be the strongest team heading down. Team COVID might be the strongest team heading down the stretch here. And I think it's going to affect, Kansas City this week. So Kansas City's the hottest team in the league, and they may not be at when this is over this weekend.
You think Matt LaFleur gets enough credit? I mean, Aaron Rodgers is kind of the headliner there, obviously, in this quarterback league, but LaFleur is 36-9 in the regular season now. If my quick math tells me that's an 800 winning percentage. That's awfully good.
Yeah, I mean, his first year, I voted for him for Coach of the Year. I don't think he's won it. Did he win it that year? But yeah, I mean, if you look at what he's doing, it hasn't been done by very many coaches. 13-3, and he might have a chance to go, 14-3. So yeah, he's got the advantage of Aaron Rodgers, but the guy before him had Aaron Rodgers and it got fired. So in his prime. So to me, it's the guy's doing something, and that's why in the off season I never thought in a million years that Aaron Rodgers was going to move on. He might move on after this one, but this coach is he's special, and he works well with Aaron Rodgers. And if I'm Rodgers, you got to work it out and finish your career there, because I think with this guy, that's your chance to win another Super Bowl.
A couple more games I want to get to before we're done here. Colts at Cardinals is one of those NFC, AFC matchups. It's just kind of intriguing to me because you've got, obviously the Cardinals kind of in this free fall, especially after losing to Detroit and losing badly. Colts kind of on the upswing after that good win last week over New England. Kind of two teams heading in opposite directions, but a game in Arizona. Colts are still the underdog in that game, but you pick them to win a relatively high-scoring game. Jonathan Taylor having a great season for Indianapolis. It's hard when two teams don't play each other very much to kind of know how they match up. But how do you see this game playing out?
Yeah, I mean, I also have one of the 50 MVP votes, and Jonathan Taylor's got me thinking very, strongly about going against a quarterback, which is going to be hard to do this year with the Bradys and the Rodgers and players like that. The guy's got over 1,500 yards. He's got 17 touchdowns. He's got 3 more games to go. They got a top 10. I think they're 9th in scoring defense, and I feel like the Cardinals. I picked them in the beginning of the summer to be like one of the surprise teams. I didn't think that they would go out 10-0 or whatever it was. But to me, I feel like I've always felt that they're good, but from the coaching staff to the quarterback, they're like one season away. They're going to be one of those teams that gets in the playoffs and gets beat and then has to come back and earn it the next year again. And so I like where the Cardinals are where the Colts are, and I think the Cardinals are. We'll learn a lot about the Cardinals because not only did they lost 2 straight, but as you said, they lost to the Lions, and not only did they lose to the Lions, they got destroyed by the Lions. So there's a lot of question marks around a team that's could have clinched now 3 or 4 weeks or 3 weeks in a row. So I like that. I like where the Colts are, and I don't like where the Cardinals are, even though the Cardinals are really talented.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to look at it. And this would be a bounce back win for them if they could get it. Couple more big division implications. Ravens at Bengals. Bengals going for a sweep of that series. Ravens been struggling lately, but you do like Baltimore in this game. I got to imagine this one is going to be down to the wire regardless. This just feels like one of those games that's going to be hard-hitting and close no matter what.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about a weird season. As an old AFC North fan growing up, when it was AFC Central, and watching the Bengals just be the laughingstock of the league for so many years, decades, and then all of a sudden now you say that they could sweep Baltimore and they could sweep the Steelers in the same season. Now I picked the Ravens, even though the Ravens lost 41-17 to the Bengals the first time they played. I think that would be a typical Ravens, to me the Ravens and the Steelers might be just like the toughest teams to knock out in football, because they just, no matter what they have, they won't go away. And I feel like the Ravens are the first team to lose 3 straight by a total of 4 points. I mean, you go for two times in 3 weeks at the end to try and win, and you lose. So they're there, and I feel like they're gonna be a tough team to beat. And I think Cincinnati is not ready for that. What kind of game it's going to be.
Bills, Patriots, another one with massive implications. Patriots were rolling until they ran into Jonathan Taylor, who you talked about being an MVP candidate. Bills have been kind of all over the map this year. Early in the year, we thought maybe this was the team to beat. Kind of a statement game, I would imagine, for the Bills. Are they ready to kind of assume, a lengthy run atop that division, or are the Patriots kind of going to make a comeback and kind of be right there with them still? This is a fascinating matchup to me.
Yeah, I know. As you know, I've been high on the Patriots for like most of the season. Just think they were the best team. They were the best coach team. And what Indianapolis was able to do to them, it kind of really, that's when played a big role in why I picked the Colts to beat the Cardinals and for Taylor to be kind of an MVP type guy. It's a fascinating matchup. I think the Bills, they're a weird team. Their wins are by like 15 or more, and then they have it's win, lose. They're much better than what I think their record is. I like the Patriots to kind of get things right. It's hard for me to pick the Patriots to have a losing streak in December when they're a good team. And it's easier for me to pick against the Bills in that situation based on how the Bills have been up and down.
Well, it should be a good weekend of viewing, good Saturday games, good Sunday games, lots of implications, as there should be at this point in the season. And hopefully we see teams at, relatively full strength. COVID is going to wreak havoc, I feel like, on the last few weeks of this season and the postseason. We'll just have to see how much and to whom. Mark Craig, good stuff. Thanks for hopping on again, and we'll see you down the road, okay?
All right. Thanks, Michael.
Now, poor Mark Craig didn't know that Dalvin Cook would be out when he made those picks. Maybe he feels the same way. I don't know. Alexander Mattison is a good backup. We'll just have to see. But the nature of making picks in the NFL this season is fraught with peril. I do not envy Mark trying to do that every week. Let's finish with the cooler. It's more or less a wrap on the whole year. Just want to say thank you to everybody who has listened to Daily Delivery so far. We'll be off next week, taking a little bit of vacation time. There will be one bonus episode at the end of next week. Lavelle E. Neal III and I talking about what we liked about 2021 and what we think is going to be kind of what are going to be the big stories in Minnesota sports in 2022. So that will be late next week. But as far as regularly scheduled shows, that is it for 2021. Thank you so much for listening, the thousands of you who listen every single day. It means a lot to me. This project started about 11 months ago. It's been a lot of fun. Looking forward to a lot more fun in 2022 and beyond. But thank you so much. Happy holidays and best of luck in the new year. Have a great, safe new year, and we will catch you again in 2022.